Hey guys, Brian from PFC here with part 2 of our drill task condition in Stunted. Our last edition that we did focused specifically on distance that we were away from the threat. We incorporated some numbers and some letters and whatnot on the targets, and we created an unknown distance so the shooter wasn't able to mentally or physically prepare for that. This particular edition has to do with round count. We see a lot of times when we're out on the range, people are taking in their firearm qualification course, they're always asking the instructor, how many rounds on this stage? And we're specifically told by the string of fire from the instructor that it's going to be 2 rounds to the body, it's going to be 2 rounds to the body, 2 rounds to the head, 2 rounds reload, and then 2 rounds. Completely unrealistic in the fight. So on this particular stage, what's going to happen is the line officer is going to take and pick a time, just a random arbitrary time, and they're going to run that on a stopwatch, run that on a shot clock, or if you have a nice enough range that allows for it with turning targets, to take and face the targets for the shooter, and they're only going to be exposed for a certain amount of time that the shooter is not going to know. What's the responsibility of the shooter here? The goal is to take and fire as many rounds as possible, accurately albeit, at that target in that given time frame. Now, we know that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and hoping for different results. So what we don't want to see the shooter do is fire an excessive or just ridiculous number of rounds at the same target zone. If we could assume, for example, that armed adversaries out there do at times wear body armor, or that the rounds may not be effectively punching through a barrier, if we keep just firing round after round into the same target zone on the body, it's going to have little to no effect. So we've got to change things up. Now at PFC, we advocate the thoracic cavity, the pelvic girdle on the body, and then the craniocular cavity on the head. So the way that we would advocate firing this drill is to fire never more than 2 rounds in succession at any given target zone. Now, one of the unique or fun or interesting byproducts of this drill is that sometimes that range officer is going to give a longer exposure, and you'll see that the shooter tends to game things and think that they're going to run out of time, and they'll actually stop shooting prematurely. Bad thing to do in the fight. Second thing that will happen is that the line officer will give a ridiculously abbreviated or short interval of time, which will not afford the shooter the opportunity to get any rounds off. That's not going to have a big effect on that particular string of fire, but you can imagine the subsequent strings of fire, which is where the shooter is going to rush. So how do we score this? Well, imagine on a regular qualification course, we've got 2 shooters next to each other. One shooter takes and he's done in half the time that's allotted, the other shooter is done and he uses every single second. But they both shoot identical percentages. They both shoot, we'll say, 91%. They're not both 91% shooters. One is capable of achieving the task at a much faster rate than the other one is. So on this particular qual course, if you were going to structure something along these lines, you would have an unknown number of rounds on this. At the end of this, you could have a score of one shooter as high as 1,000 and another shooter as low as 250. The goal here is to bring up the speed. We hear all the time that adage that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That is not true. Slow can be smooth, fast can be smooth, but slow is downright slow. Give this one a try. I think you guys will enjoy it. Stay safe.